Welcome to the Knife Show, where we dissect. Oh man, I am the best introer ever. Wait, like the there's something blocking my dialogue box right now, so I'm like, I have to like go to the side to read it. Welcome to
No
the
problem.
where we dissect the human psyche and society. My name is Jason. I'm an INFJ. Welcome to the Knife Show, where we dissect the. Why am I so bad at this? I don't understand. I really just. Is it psyche or psych?
I say psyche,
Welcome.
and that's what makes it rhyme with society too.
Okay. Welcome to the Knife Show, where we dissect the human psyche and society. My name is Joyce, and I'm an INFJ.
My name is Denzel. I'm an ENFJ, and today we are discussing NFJ compatibility. So this is going to be a very interesting topic because we're going to be not only discussing how NFJs are compatible or like what their compatibility is like, from our general experience with each other, but then also how they might be compatible with other types. And I feel like this is a popular topic for a lot of people to think about because they're always wondering, like, oh my goodness, like, so when they find out about what type they are, like, so what types do I get best along with, and what types do I not get along with, and stuff like that. And so I think that, yeah, this would be a good free flow conversation. And honestly, it's probably going to be a good way for me to vent about how much I hate Joyce. So let's get started. So, Joyce, I would like to ask you first, per usual, how would you describe your relationship with ENFJs? Both good and bad. We can take it.
Yeah.
At least a minute.
I always find ENFJs to be really shiny, especially if they're the charismatic kind. And so I'm often attracted to their NF energy. I can kind of feel how they want to help people reach their potential, or they see the potential in people and they want to kind of nurture it or figure out a way to teach people to become the best versions of themselves. So I'm really attracted to that energy and their spiritual beliefs, even if it's not religious. Like, they have a really good framework for understanding things that are beyond what the eye can see. So that unseen component, they master it in a really eloquent way. And I'm always charmed by their FE. And so it's what my FE aspires to be like, but it's not there yet. So it's almost like a Charmander, which is the Pokemon, looking at its final form, which is the big dragon Pokemon, and you're like, wow, that is so cool. I want to be like that.
Charizard. Wow.
Yeah, but I find like ENFJs never notice me ever. I'm like that wallflower that continues to be a wallflower while I silently admire them from a distance. I find that when I do become friends or something with them, we never fight. Or when we do fight, it's very reconcilable. So I've never had such smooth, non-drama or easily solved drama relationships than with an ENFJ. I think it's because with our FE, or at least with me, I'm just not a conflict creating person. So if people ever get into a fight and I'm in a relationship with them, 99% of the time it's them because I'm pretty chill. So I find with ENFJs, if we do fight, it's easy to talk it through because we both value communication and making the relationship the best it can be. And so I find it's one of the smoothest dynamics I've ever had with another individual. They just don't notice me.
Wow. Well, I definitely have a lot to say there, but I wanted to ask, that's the only negative that I had to brace myself for, that we just don't notice you?
I find what's surprising is like I find ENFJs to be super shiny, and when I actually get close to them, their SE is way stronger than I anticipated. So
Mm.
they're a funny bunch. You get to kind of figure out an ENFJ's hidden impulsive side, which is really
Oh.
fascinating. I always find it in all my ENFJ friends. It's Like, oh, I did not know that existed in you. Oh, interesting. So
How would you describe the impulsive side of your the ENFJs that you know?
they have this ESTP-ish side. So
Mm.
it's like for some of them, it can be this side of them that really likes like sexual humor, and it's unexpected. I was not expecting that. And sometimes the side of them is one that kind of impulsively likes to do things. So they're more adventurous than what I would expect. But I guess I expected it, but I'm because I'm sometimes like they try to bring you along with their adventure too, and I'm like, wow, this is like someone trying to teach me SE, and they're charming, so their FE is able to kind of get you on board even if you weren't initially on board. So now you're like Christopher Columbus going to a new nation, and you don't even know you're going there, but apparently the ENFP is taking you there, and you're like, ah.
That's funny. Well, as long as whenever you get to the spot you're happy, then that's good. Have you ever been led by an ENFJ and you feel like, dang, I probably should not have followed them here?
They're really sweet about it. So their FE knows if they've gone too much overboard. So they'll try to check in and go like, "Are you okay?" If they see you uncomfortable, an FE dominant type is likely to slow down. So they're quicker to do that. Although sometimes I seem more reluctant to do things than I actually am. So I might just be like really reserved and just shocked that I'm being put into
Mm.
this extroverted world rather than judging them. And so I sometimes get insecure. I'm
Mm.
I'm like, I don't want to tell you that like I like what you're actually introducing to me. I just it's interesting, and I just need time to process it.
Okay. No, that's intriguing. That's good to know. It's like, no, 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 no. I like it. I just need time. Well, I guess my turn. So how I feel about INFJs, like I said, I hate Joyce, so there's that. She's the bane of, no, I'm just kidding. INFJs are actually like I always kind of like say this. It's like INFJs and like ISFPs are like pretty much like at the top. Um, and obviously I'm married to an ISFP, so it's easy for me to like appear biased there. But I think it was actually because of that bias, even before I knew about type, that led me to her. And so that's interesting. But with INFJs, I've kind of like seen the same thing. Like my best friend, David, he's an INFJ, and we have been best friends ever since we were 2 years old. People have always described us as well. To be totally honest, people have always said that we were twins, except that he's the meaner version of me. And he's not. He's not mean. He's just quick to. He's a lot quicker to be cold. And if anything, that was back when he was younger. Now he's like really come out of that. But still, yeah, he's always been my best friend in that way. And literally, like just like what you were saying, Joyce, every INFJ that I meet and starts like connect with, it's seamless. Like I and to me, it's like I often on my channel I talk about how like Professor Xavier and Jean Grey, like I believe that Professor Xavier from the movies is an ENFJ and then Jean Grey is an INFJ, and they just have this very like intuitive understanding of each other. Especially when you watch the movie X-Men Apocalypse, I feel like you see that like very strong. Like there's a connection that honestly like, nobody's able to penetrate. I remember also that I had an INFJ friend like a few years back who when we would interact, then literally there was like two different people that said that they felt like we were in a bubble, and the rapport was so fast and strong that they just had like they had no choice but like to sit back and like watch rather than be able to like jump in. And that's kind of like how it felt. Like I would describe as like, we're double dutching, and we're double dutching like soul lightning speed while like staring at each other and everything. And it's like everybody's just watching in awe, like, whoa, like they really connect with each other. And so yeah, like every INFJ that I know, I feel like literally there's only one, maybe two. I'm just gonna say two to be safe, but there's only one INFJ that I've had conflict with out of all the ones that I know. And even then, um, we were able to communicate and be able to like resolve things and like, reconstruct like different boundaries and all of this other stuff to be able to like better understand. And I feel like that's where the NFJ dynamics really excel, because as an NFJ, those are the only two types out of every single personality type that have NI and FE as their top functions. Knife. But yeah, they have NI and FE as their top functions, and these two functions, like FE, is all about really understanding the dynamic, the interpersonal dynamics of other people, and it's also really focused on the sociogram. It's focused on, it's pretty much looking at the weaker points of a relationship. And to me, FE is kind of like, okay, it's like always looking at, okay, what could have made this interpersonal or this interaction better? Ooh, there was conflict over here. Where did the conflict even start? Because it looks like to most people, they think that it started over here, but actually there was a crack way back over here. And maybe if they had just said it in this tone, or maybe if they had communicated over here, like, so it's observing all of this stuff. And of all functions, in my opinion, like FE is just the most focused on like how do we interact with each other in the most fluent way possible. And then when you add that layer of NI to it, to be able to look at the depth of everything and like be able to look at the interpersonal, the relationship and the interactions from like a metacognitive stance, and be able to look at the roots of where things happened, and thinking of like meta ways to be able to fix them and everything. Like you just add a whole different layer to that dynamic. And so the NFJs are constantly, getting into each other's mind, and they're constantly like, serving each other. I feel like that's like one of the only dynamics where it's like both people are thinking so much about each other that it's almost like they don't have to think much about themselves, from my experience. And I think that it's really dope, um, because they just really naturally take care of each other. And it's almost like you're spoiling each other, because then when you go out and you start seeing other types, obviously not like other types are not as gifted in mind reading per se. And so then you're expecting them to do that to you, and it just doesn't really work. They're not as gifted all the time as like maybe sometimes like tactfully speaking about the problems in a relationship, which for me too, like, I feel like the only times that I'm afraid to speak up about a problem is if I'm afraid that the other person's going to be offended, and slash or we don't have a solution at hand. But then with INFJs, usually I feel like, okay, no, they'll know where I'm coming from. They know how to detach enough to not be sensitive about it, so that I can be honest about, hey, this is what I feel. And this is, I'm just saying this so that we can better like have a better dynamic. And they're able to understand that, they're able to communicate whatever the same thing to me, and then I'm able to be like, okay, yeah, no, I understand. And again, seamlessly. To address your comment about how we tend not to notice, at least you, I think that's interesting, because yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like I usually notice INFJs. I think that of all types, like I said, I'm most drawn to INFJs and ISFPs, because at least in my mapping, my legend of on the map, ISFPs and INFJs have the most similar energies and auras, just slightly different. And that, whatever that aura is, I'm drawn to that. But yeah, so for me, I feel like I am usually drawn to that kind of like energy and everything like that, and I get locked into it. Um, but yeah, I guess I can't really speak in this situation because when me and you first met, you were the one, if I remember correctly, to kind of like point yourself out to me, Joyce. I think it was at Profiler Training. So so it's like, oh well, I guess yeah, I didn't. Granted, I guess maybe in my defense, there was just so much going on too. Like there was like 70 other people and ENFPs galore and all of that. And like, so when you popped up, and I'm like, oh, hey, Joyce, but yeah, who knows? I feel like if we were probably in like a more quote unquote like smaller setting, then I would have been drawn to you. But I feel like yeah, when it comes like for example like parties or something like that, I'm drawn to the person who seems to be a little bit on the reserved side and has a steady nature to them. And is kind of like in their own world, kind of not present, but then kind of is, and stuff like that. Because I something in my mind is just always like, what is that person thinking about? So it's almost like people are like around me and they're like, oh, yeah, Denzel, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, shh, you see that person over there? It could be male or female. I'm like, what are they thinking about? And I'm just like curious and I want to like, go and like probe their mind, like understand and before you know it, it's like that's way more fascinating to me than whatever is going on at the party. So yeah, but I don't know. I can't speak for all other ENFJs and why they might not notice INFJs as much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because dominant NI is not always that shiny because your thoughts are shiny, but you have to share your thoughts in order to be shiny in that way. So what I mean is like the most interesting part of an INFJ is actually their thoughts about the human condition or about philosophical topics or about abstract concepts. And it's not something that's going to be immediately apparent. Like a lot of the INFJs I know, they dress very modestly. And so like just even demeanor wise, they might not be something that's immediately captivating.
Very
Unlike
true.
an ESTP that's wearing like really
Mhm.
flashy clothing to a party. Um, there's going to be a more tampered down, humble kind of appearance with a lot of INFJs. And so they don't have that extroverted ding, 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 like no Christmas lights strapped onto them. So you're going to have to listen to their opinions on things to be more captivated rather than just the looks itself.
That's true. That's totally true. Like, yeah. Because even when you like see the different pictures and everything like that, that they, like INFJ pictures and the way they dress compared to like INFPs, ISFPs, and ENFJs, like all of these other different types, it's like, yeah, you can see like there's more muted colors that they're wearing, and like, yeah, they're more like faded into the background in some way. And unless if you're drawn, kind of like what I was saying about meeting an INFJ or seeing an INFJ at a party or something, and you're kind of like drawn to like, what is that person thinking about? Yeah, that's like the only from my standpoint, the only shininess that they might have, um, as in comparison to like maybe an ESTP would be shiny or attractive in the way they dress and how boisterous they might be, or just like smooth, whatever, performance wise, whatever they're doing. And ISFP might even like I said, they have like this very similar energy from my standpoint to what INFJs do, but they can be a little bit more aloof and free spirited in a way that almost catches your attention too. It's like because it's like the INFJ will still kind of like be in line with what's going on, but like the ISFP, like when you think about it, it's like, oh, they're really like marching to the beat of their own drum. So it's like, what's that oddball over there? Like, and that will kind of like draw your attention in that way too, which is like one of the differences in aura that I sense. And then INFPs, oh yeah, they can sometimes look a little bit like the ISFP, and like a mix of the ISFP, INFJ kind of thing, but like really it's like they definitely had that shiny aspect to them too. Like they're from what I can see, they're usually very playful. And it's easy to be able to like banter with them. Like even like with me, like when I'm like messaging with them or like whatever it might be, like it seems like their minds, and it's the same thing with ENFPs as well. Like it seems like their minds are like so bouncy that if I'm to like maybe even like do something stupid, like play out a scene, and just like I remember I was talking to an INFP one time. We had just met and we were texting, and I pretty much started playing out these role play roles where I'm like kind of this analyzer that just has a clipboard and is like taking notes on everything that she was saying or whatever. And she played right along, and we kind of like just did this whole like silly scene, like, and it started involving like donuts, and like it was just like a really silly thing that I was very highly amused by, that she was able to just pick up and like play along with. And then I was just able, like, like I was having fun, like, being able to try to like keep up in that way, even though I was the one who started it. And I couldn't help but think to myself how, like, okay, if I did this with an INFJ, I'd be lucky if they were able to like get in like two responses back. But then probably like by the third one they'd be like, okay, well that was fun. So let's get serious now. And so I feel like that there's like a that you like you said, like with that modesty, like there's more of like a serious and steady nature to them. That again, like might not always come off as flashy. They're gonna be more of like the Dumbledore types. And if you don't find someone who's or like Dumbledore, Galadriel, flashy and attractive or alluring in that way, then you might overlook the INFJ.
Yeah, story of my life. That's been a major point of insecurity for me. I've actually gotten way more SE as I've gotten older. I do wear flashier things than what I used to because I
I've
know
noticed.
I know my propensity to like to not be aesthetically flashy, and is that's not the best to your self-esteem when everyone else notices everyone else in the room except for you. So I hang around SFPs in my life before, and so what happened was I just thought they were so pretty and aesthetic that I dressed like them. So the way that I dress, I don't think it's stereotypically INFJ. I dress more like an SFP just because of social environmental upbringing. And it also comes from a place of insecurity. It's like I look at them and I'm like, oh, they look nice. Oh, I look plain. All right, let's try to rectify this situation. Because when I look at them, I'm at awe at how pretty they are sometimes. And when you hang around pretty people, there's this need to kind of also measure up and benchmark. And I think
Mm,
it's also it can be a hit to your self-esteem and self-concept as a person when you do like people and they don't like you back. And that unreciprocated
very much so.
affection can cause INFJs to get more into their SE too. The
Mm,
necessity drives action.
yeah, no, that's definitely true. I feel like honestly, I would not be surprised if somewhere along the lines, Frank James might have also picked up of quite a few tips from other SPs, to be able to look the way that he did, because at the end of the day, like that is just point blank period, like a lot of times like what will draw people. And I feel like the lower SE is in your stack, then the less that you care about your appearance, or the less that you put energy towards it, or that you might even like just think about it. But then as time goes on and you grow older, then you start to realize, like, at first, like, you go from this idea of like, yeah, that's all just so shallow, and like, people should love me for the substance in my heart and all of that. Like, I know I've definitely been there. But then you eventually come to realize, like, whether you like it or not, people are going to judge you. They're going to make judgments based off of how you dress. based off of how you look, based off of how you present yourself. Like if you talk with your hands like just right by your side and just straight down and you don't really like move and all of that, then that's going to give a message, as opposed to like somebody who, I mean, I naturally do it, but somebody who like brings more energy and all of that, like, that's going to also um, gear a sort of like, is going to bring attention in a certain way. If you are wearing like muted colors, well, then obviously you're going to be muted to an extent, but like if you're wearing something a little bit, like doesn't have to be like polka dots, but like just something that is a little bit more appealing, then yeah, people are going to look at you, and you can't. The truth of the matter is that until you can get people to actually pay attention to you, then they'll never be able to receive what you're giving them. And I feel like that's a lesson that personally I had to learn, because it's like, I mean, even as like an SE tertiary, like I didn't really, it's like I cared a little bit growing up, like especially in the Bronx, like I cared a little bit about style. We all dress weird over there. So so but it wasn't until I got into college that, I met Jamila and everything, and she was like, no, you dress horribly. And she was right. And she like came into my room and like threw away a lot of my old clothes and everything. And she started pretty much like vetting the stuff that I would wear until I was able to catch better patterns. Because now I actually started to pay more attention to like, oh, so even though I thought that this matched, it really doesn't, because they actually have to be the same shade of purple. I just thought if as long as they're both purple, it's okay. And then her and my ESFP friend are like, no, and it's like, no, you're matching, but you have four different colors. I'm like, but it's matching. It's like, no, so stuff like that, like you start like noticing, like, okay, and yeah, and then it's like speaking to ESFPs. I literally have talked. Just the other day, I was speaking to an ESFP, and she has been venting to me about how she feels like all people ever look at her, like people just only like her for how she looks. And she's like so sad about that. Like she's in her 30s and everything, and she's like Denzel, like I feel like people literally only look at me and like they just love me because of like how nice my body is and how well I dress and like all of that, and like I'm so disposable to them because that's all that they see me for. And it's like, dang. And I asked her, um, so what would you say are some of the things that people tend to overlook about you that you wish that more men or whoever, like, liked about you or knew about you? And very honestly speaking, it's been a few days now and that person has never texted back. And I feel like that's saying something, because it's kind of like, maybe if you said that to an IDOM, that would come easily to them because they probably spend more time thinking about stuff like that. But then they have to get the SE to like, okay, I still need to attract before you can see what's there. And then for the SE Dom, it's like, okay, I get all of the attention, but once it's here, it's like, now what? Like, how do I keep it? And so I think that's a very interesting phenomenon that INJs can like really like get into. I mean, honestly, I don't think I have any negative stuff for INFJs, at least when it comes to like me and their dynamics. It's more of like, I guess, like if I see it like with other people's, like, oh, they could like be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, like as they're extending FE until finally it's like, no, I'm not fine. And it's like, whoa, you didn't communicate that you were overextending. So of course, and it's like, and then they expect people to read their minds, or they read other people's minds sometimes. So it's like, but again, like when it comes to my dynamics with them, I don't really see this problem too much, if at all. I personally do think that they make great, even like partners for each other, whether it be like teammates or even romantic, or just together like in that way. Like I think that they do well for each other. I know that a lot of types, they usually like the notion would be like, oh yeah, they don't cover each other's blind spots, and so they want to be able to help each other grow and stuff like that. And I feel like that that's like the mathematical thing to say, but at least from my opinion, I think that practically it still works. Like you can still like both of them still actually teach each other so much, and they could be so much of like a powerful duo that things could really get going and like change, and they'd have the connections to be able to fill in whatever blind spots of like TE or whatever that they might need, um, because they'd probably just have somebody in their life to be able to do that with. But yeah, even just with like friendships, great compatibility over there in my opinion. Um, brother and sister, great compatibility over there because once again, um, I think out of all the types, these two types are the ones most concerned and most focused on how do we interact, how do we get along, what do we have in common, and how can we get our differences to still fit in this jar so that we're all completely still here. And I think that's a very valuable thing to bring. As a matter of fact, I think that's why they tend to take the mentor roles in their relationships. And I remember on personalitygjunkie.com, they wrote an article about this that I read some years ago, and I was like, oh man. And it literally said like why INFJs and ENFJs have trouble in romantic relationships. And I think it's because of exactly that. It's like the FE and I always feels like, okay, I know how this relationship is supposed to look like. I know how to like fix it. I know how to like, whatever. And if you're dealing with another type who just kind of wants it to be like a little bit more easy, more laid back, more natural in a way, then they could feel like, yo, you're putting too much expectations on this. And it could strain the relationship if they don't learn how to chill. Whereas like if the ENFJ and INFJ are with each other, then it's like, okay, we both have the same ideal and we're both like because we both have that same goal, then it's effortless for us to continue to work on it in that way. So that is my theory. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, Denzel. I have a potential con. So with the ENFJs that I know, sometimes I can feel like a drop in an ocean in comparison to all of their
Mm,
relationships. So over time, sometimes I can get a little bit resentful too, because it's almost like the dispersed attention doesn't feel like undivided attention or like the relationship means anything because it's just one of the many that they have. And so
mm,
oftentimes I can kind of feel disposable in that way, and it can make me
mm,
lessen my commitment. And that's something I've noticed.
mm. That actually makes a lot of sense for sure. I feel like that's also like a stereotypical E versus I problem a lot of times. And I know, especially like looking at my past, uh, when I first had met Jamila, I literally would have like over 30 different people like texting me at a time. So like I was just always like managing stuff in that way. And it wasn't until like I learned to really like hone in on my FE, like managing that dynamic, like with NI, like where are these dynamics really going? Like how much water do I have? Like, what type of garden am I looking for? And categorizing, like prioritizing like who to like water, who not to water, stuff like that, that I was able to get into a Zen point and not spread myself too thin, which I think is what a lot of ENFJs do. They spread themselves too thin because they have like so wide of a territory and they don't know how to like close off relationships. And unlike, for example, like an ENFP, in my who from my experience, like they have the same problems. Like, yeah, everybody come join. But ENFPs are like quick to just be like, all right, well, this is fun, and then just kind of leave. Whereas like the ENFJ, from my experience, like they will try to manage all 1,000 relationships still. And so it's like, and I feel like that's why even sometimes like paradoxically people could feel closer to the ENFP because they're not managing so many relationships, but they they can move on so quickly that it's like, wait, you just made a new friend again? And when will my turn be up where you just kind of dispose of me or whatever? Whereas like I like, would you say that you actually feel like the ENFJs dispose you, or is it like they give you like less water per se?
I sometimes feel like I'm their favorite person when I'm with them, and then they'll call someone their favorite person in another setting, and I'm like, it kind of feels like you were said sweet words to, but then another person gets sweet words too, and it's like,
Mm,
interesting. This is more of a
mm,
behavioral habit of this person rather than them trying to tell you where you are with them.
mm. And just to be clear, like they tell you like you're my favorite person, and then they tell the other person, or you said that you just feel like you're their favorite person, but then you hear them say that about another person.
It for some ENFJs, they're very good with words of affirmation, and so sometimes they'll say very sweet words to one friend, and then they'll say sweet words to you, and then they'll say sweet words to this other person, because there's an element of FESE. It's getting drawn in the moment to feel emotionally
Mm-hmm.
captivated too, and so they'll say very strong statements about people sometimes, and then about another person too. But this could be a general
Mm-hmm.
quality some extroverts as well, especially if they
Mm-hmm.
have like a feeling or FE preference. I don't know. With some people, it can be hard to commit and put all your eggs in one basket. The higher you have
Oh
FE,
yeah.
the more you don't put all your eggs into one relational basket. And so what will
Uh,
happen is it looks like a lot of dispersed energy, and you don't really know what you mean to the ENFJ because they they know how to finesse their way with every relationship. And so I don't
that's
know
so true.
which is true and which is not. Um, so it's interesting, like with my relationships with ENFPs, I find that when they are captivated by me, they actually
Mm-hmm.
go FI intense into it. So they
Mm-hmm.
actually go like this Joyce, and I can feel them siphoning their attention to our relationship where it feels more intimate
Mm-hmm.
that way. I've I've never had an ENFJ's commitment though before, like a full commitment. I have an ENFJ who considers me their best friend, but it also kind of feels like I'm a best friend in their sea of best friends. And so when an
Mm-hmm.
ENFP
Mm-hmm.
calls me their best friend, um, at least with the ones that I know, um,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that attention just on me. Like when they say I have a
Yeah.
special place in their heart, they really mean I have that place and just like three other people too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really noteworthy though, because I feel like a principal value for me personally is being very, very intentional with my words. And so I can never say to someone, you're my favorite person, or you're like very like explicitly grandiose things unless if it's that true. Because it's like, and I feel like, especially with TI being lower stack, then I think that, less focused ENFJs who maybe are just more captivated by the ESE of the moment, they might just like say that, it's like, yeah, you're my favorite person or whatever like that, because they're not really thinking of like the magnitude of that word favorite. Whereas like for me, like because actually it's because of that tendency that you just mentioned, that's why I decided to years ago like really hone in and be like, let me make sure that I stop that habit and I only like say what I really, really, really mean. And so now it's like everything that I say is always 100% authentic. Um, but that's also why, like, I'm like, even with Jamila, like, she'll say certain things. I'm like, no, that's not the word that I use. Like, I become very pedantic because I know the magnitude of each word, which again, like, I like maybe the general ENFJ might not do that. It's like, oh, well, like even like, well, yeah, you can have a lot of best friends because they're your best friends. It's kind of like having your best group of eggs. These are your eggs that are better than all the rest of the eggs, which still counts. But then some people can think of like, no, a best friend means just one. There's only one best man in a wedding, right? And it's like And so I feel like, it always depends on like how that is, and both of them are right. Um, but yeah, like because of exactly like I said, like what you just said, that is something that I've tried to like be like really, really careful of. Like I will not say such a thing because I want all of my words to mean a lot. And like I don't like when people are like about my words, and because I know I'm an expressive person too, then it's like okay, it has to be like an equal thing. Like if I'm going to express, it has to be 100% authentic and true and accurate, so that if I make sure I do that on my part, then they can do on their part of just believing that at least I believe what I'm saying. So even if you don't really think that you're my best friend or something like that, the least you can do is believe that I'm really convinced that you are, if that makes sense. So I think that that's, but again, I don't know. I don't think I can speak for all ENFJs when it comes to that. I feel like even when I'm interacting with other ENFJs, if they were to say stuff like that sometimes, and sometimes I'm like, So I know exactly like what you mean, because I know like how I used to be as well, and I'm still trying to be cautious of that. Um, but I will say, uh, when you brought this one up, this was an interesting thing because it connected back to a thought that I had had, um, which maybe if it needs to be edited, then it could be edited. But I do remember on your video with Susan and with Susan, the Q&A. So I remember that you were speaking about how you've never had a friend that you just felt like matched or like checked off all of your boxes and stuff like that. And you were talking about how like as INFJs, like both you and Susan Storm, like we're both like as INFJs, like we're like we're a concept that's the mind and this that, and I see a lot of that, like from INFJs, and I'm always thinking like, are they really like just that complicated, or do they just really have like like too high of an ideal, and they maybe reach out like to four people and it doesn't work, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm fated to never have like a friend that meets everything. So it's something that I'm still trying to like figure out. But I do remember, if I'm being like candid, that when I was happy that like when I asked that question and you and Susan like paused, because I could see you guys like in real time going like running the simulations in your head, like, uh-oh, how do I answer this? And yeah, it's true. I put y'all on the spot intentionally because I really wanted to know the authentic answer. And y'all both answered very honestly, like, yeah, no, I've never had a friend that does that.
Oftentimes, INFJs can feel like relationships can be a one-way street. It's like you're really good at listening and affirming and making others feel seen, heard, and valued. But the other way around, it takes a little more effort, and it's like people will understand you on a surface level, but they won't really understand the abstract concept that is you, which feels like the most real version of you. And so oftentimes there can be this loneliness even within groups, just because you'll be talking in different languages. So you can see each of the 8 functions as a different language. And so there's not a lot of introverted intuition users. And so oftentimes communicating an NI can feel like a foreign language, and you notice it. And that was one of the things that sold me about typology, realizing where that came from, that miscommunication, because people would get what I was saying up to an extent, but I would toss a ball and people wouldn't be able to throw it back at me in the same way that I would need to feel intellectually stimulated. And so oftentimes INFJs might feel the need to FE accommodate or FE placate their actual self just to be with other people, because they know that they can't really talk in their native language. And so Denzel asks, personally speaking, do either of you as INFJ ever feel seen and satisfied in a dynamic, or does it seem nearly impossible?
Only with you, Denzel. um, I don't know. I don't. Do you, Joyce?
No, I don't.
I don't think I've ever felt maybe for moments here and there, like if someone really connects with something I'm saying, but not really, no.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really felt seen and satisfied in a dynamic. I've had moments, but there's never one person who can take the completion of what I say. It's either like sometimes I'll try to explain the experience, but I can see the person either like getting offended or they miss the point in some way, and my FE will feel a need to kind of placate how they feel, and then I never end up really sharing the exact thing I've been thinking about. Or I'll have moments with individuals where they can take certain ideas that I present, but they won't be able to take the entirety of the statement and the concept that I give them.
I remember being hung up on that. Like, I didn't expect either of you to say me, just for the record, but rather I was just like, wow, like nobody else in their life, and it made me start to wonder, like, is it that hard to be an INFJ's like best favorite friend? And if that's the case, why even try? And so then it starts to make you feel like, yeah, if I'm never really gonna check all of your boxes, then why should I put all of my eggs in that basket? But I can see how with the INFJ, then it could look like, yeah, you're never going to put all of your eggs in this basket. So then how do you ever expect to be my best friend? And it's like, well, no, you have to, you have to give me a chance first. And the INFJ might be like, no, you have to take the risk and put the eggs in the basket. Well, I'm not going to do that. So then I could see that being like a thing. Do you have any insight over there though?
Yeah, so there's a measuredness to the ENFJs. They're like, I want to give out and actually get something in return type of thing. So sometimes like the INFJ being very private and reserved can come across as a lack of investment or a lack of care. And the ENFJ can go like, oh, the INFJ doesn't really care, so I'm going to put my eggs in others' baskets. And then the INFJ is like, well, the ENFJ doesn't care because the ENFJ is going around willy-nilly giving all their eggs to all the other people's baskets. So that's where the miscommunication in this relationship can happen. The INFJ can seem like too tough of a shell to crack, and the ENFJ can kind of get off-put by that. And they might just invest into the other relationships, not because the INFJ is not important, just because the INFJ is accidentally playing too hard to get, and it seems like an impossible case. And so it kind of causes people to want to give up almost. Whereas,
or even maybe if not give up, I would say stick around. Like I was saying earlier, like you're still getting watered, but yeah, not all of my eggs will be there because it's like, oh no, if I bet all of my eggs over here, I'm gonna lose them because I'm like 5 years will pass and this person's like, yeah, you still don't check all my boxes. Whoa, I should have just kept on investing in other places.
yeah.
But then, like you're saying, the paradox is like maybe if you really did actually put them there, then you could have become that person's like best friend or best person, whatever, and then completely fulfill everything that they want.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry to have cut you off.
Yeah. So it feels like there's a sense of giving up the chance at exclusivity almost, or at a stronger relationship because of those fears, which happens a lot in relationships in general. Like a party gets scared and then the other party gets more scared off of that fear. And then it just is a perpetuating cycle of people creating problems from nothing. They call it the garbage can model, where a lot of problems are caused by actual humans making up situations in their head, and then that projection causes a problem because then that will cause another projection that causes another one, which is responsible for a large majority of problems that they're mostly made up in our head. And so that's why I find with ENFPs, they're able to get closer to me because they're more risk okay. So they're willing to put eggs into my basket, even though it seems like there's going to be none in return. They're more willing to take that leap. And so it's that ability to jump and be okay with whatever the outcome is without predicting what the outcome is. The thing is, like, the ENFJ is running the outcome of the simulation of the relational outcome, right? It's like, am I going to go 5 years into this relationship and it's going to be the same cold Joyce? And then the ENFJ whereas the ENFP is not running that simulation of that 5 years later cold Joyce. So they're willing to give all their eggs at that moment. And so that's what I notice. So with that favorite person comment I made earlier, I think it applies to extroverts in general. So I'm not saying ENFJs just do it. It's just that I've had Okay, so it's my saltiness that I project onto my previous relationships with ENFJs, where I'm like, they're really good at making people feel like their best friend, and then I just feel like a C within their good-willed relationships, which is not their fault. I just sometimes, yeah, I don't know. That's just me and my my baggage.
No, but
Yeah.
this is enlightening though, for sure. I feel like
Uh-huh.
a lot of INFJs watching could probably really relate, and maybe they're even looking into themselves right now. Just like ENFJs watching and looking into themselves, like, dang, how many people do I call my best friend? I should probably be more careful about that. So I feel like this vulnerability that we're showing, I personally feel like it's very helpful.
Yeah. And so I think overall ENFJs and INFJs are a really good friend or romantic partner match. So long as you guys share the same values and goals, that's really important. I think the most important component to something working is if you share your deepest values and your deepest goals, or you're able to understand the other person's deepest values and deepest goals. And that plus this type compatibility will increase the chances and likelihood of something happening and working, just because of you understanding the cognitive wire of the person you're with and just the FE urge to make things the best that they've ever been. Like I know with my ENFJ friends, they literally put their heart and soul and being into their relationships. And so having two people who genuinely want to always repair and make the relationship the A++++ version of the relationship, and this deep conversation that always happens between these two types can result in an extremely fruitful relationship, so long as they're not triggering each other's insecurities. Because with some introverts, like with IJs, they're known for invulnerability. So this means sometimes they can guard themselves and they can look a little bit more hard to fully get to know. And sometimes that can appear like an insurmountable barrier without wanting to appear that way. And so sometimes that can cause an insecurity within a party that, oh, no matter how much I try, I'm never going to get to a level of closeness that I want. And so sometimes subconsciously we accidentally do things that are against our greatest, most wanted goals in life, which is kind of ironic. It's like all maybe like maybe that INFJ really wants a deep connection, but almost like their bodily cues counteract that or send the signal that they don't want that. And so sometimes that can be misleading. And yeah, I'm just saying, I think that this match is a good match. And yeah, this was a really good conversation. And so thank you everyone for tuning in, and don't forget to stay sharp. また夜が明ければお別れ夢は遠き幻にあなたを追いかけ